Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 101 of your favourite motorsport podcast. Knowing Wheel is back and finally, I can't believe we can say this, Jamie, it's race week. How hyped are we feeling?
Very much so. It's been a long winter, especially with the early end to last season. It's felt extremely long compared to recent seasons, but we are back. It's race week. We've got the Bahrain Grand Prix coming this weekend, which means, of course, your entire YouTube will be flooded with people making outlandish predictions, which will mostly be incorrect. And
for them clicks?
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to not buck the trend at all and do exactly that today.
Exactly. Yes, it's finally time. Our final F1 2023 pre-season predictions. Of course, we did one of these back in the winter. And, it was a bit of fun, to be honest, to just try and make sure that we had content for another week on the podcast.
See him behind the curtain today.
But this is the real deal, isn't it, Jamie? This is where we make our proper predictions for the new season, and also, of course, where everything is put on the line again. Now, of course, last year, the agreement was whoever lost or whoever was further incorrect had to put a tweet out on their account.
Was that not for Fantasy? I don't think that was for this.
Was that for Fantasy? I thought it might have been for Fantasy, to be fair.
Yeah, let's go for that.
Either way, I lost last year. It was not a good look for me. I lost quite a few followers from Jamie's
tweet. Did you actually? I didn't know that.
I did get a couple of very angry responses from people.
And some people cottoned on completely, but it was a good
people there were a few of you that do listen to the podcast that did cotton on completely and tell those people who were just throwing insults at me that they were a moron.
I was very happy with my tweet.
You were very happy with the reaction. You did have a good chuckle at a couple of people that reacted to it, didn't you? But Are we doing that again for F1 Fantasy, or are we doing that for this year?
We'll do it for Fantasy. Fantasy's more quantifiable.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. I mean, there will also be... we're going to do obviously podcast today, a bit of housekeeping quickly, and then we're also going to be doing another podcast Thursday. I will leave links to our Fantasy League down in the comments below, of course, if you want to join now. I'm going to be doing a load of promo for it over this week. I want to try and get 10,000 of you in the league, if possible, this year. That's kind of the goal that we've set ourselves. And, of course, after every GP, Jamie and I will be doing, once again, a bit of a fantasy rundown to see not only how we got on, but how you guys did as well. But we will be revealing our teams later on in the week, but obviously if you want to go check them out now, if you're that desperate to see them, click the link down in the description below if you're here on YouTube, or click you won't be able to find it on Spotify or iTunes. Come to YouTube and then click on the link, I suppose. But Jamie, we've got a couple of other quick bits as well, haven't we, to go through before we get on with our predictions. The biggest one probably is that Felipe Drugovitch might find himself on the grid ready for the Bahrain GP.
Yeah, Lance Stroll, we obviously mentioned last week, was involved in a bike crash, so has done something to one of his arms, which means he couldn't take part in testing.
Broke both his wrists.
Broke both his wrists. Wow.
Yes.
That's impressive. So it meant he couldn't take part in testing. We thought Alonso might do the whole thing, but really it was obvious that Drugovitch was going to take some of the mileage, which is exactly what happened. I think it is quite a quick turnaround, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Stroll can recover. But if he can't, it will obviously be Felipe Drugovitch. I don't want to hear any of this Sebastian Vettel nonsense. So
well, it's been confirmed now, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, has it? I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's been confirmed by Aston Martin. Of course, yeah. The rumour going around was that Sebastian Vettel had contacted them saying, if you need me, I can get rinsed by Alonso for the weekend.
He would get destroyed, and that would put to bed any
absolutely
2010, 2012 controversy.
Debates, yeah. But apparently he's out camping with his family. So Seb, if you are listening, hopefully you're enjoying your camping trip still, mate. We apologise for just roasting you. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Drugovitch coming in. Which, fun fact as well, Jamie, if Drugovitch takes part in Bahrain, which I think is probably going to happen, every single Formula 2 champion will be on the grid, apart from Mick Schumacher.
That's quite jokes. Obviously F2 only started in 2017.
Correct.
But even the 2016 GP2 champion is on the grid as well.
2016 GP2 champion, and I think we have to go all the way back to Hulkenberg in 2009 for the champ. So you got Hulkenberg 2009 and obviously Lewis 2007 are the other two that are on the grid, which is kind of mad.
Yeah.
But does kind of show, because I think we always go through this quandary, don't we, of whether Formula 2 kind of suits its purpose still. But that probably is a topic for an off week
Definitely.
early on in the year. But I personally do think it's probably going to be Felipe Drugovitch in the car next weekend. Like we said, a double wrist break is probably going to take a couple of weeks to recover. And it's weather as well if he has to skip Saudi. Because you're just sort of thinking, of course, you've got a break week between Bahrain and Saudi, a break week between Saudi and Melbourne, and then, of course, 3 weeks after Melbourne before Formula One's back round 4, which I can't quite remember off the top of my head where we're heading.
Imola, is it not? No.
No, Imola's way later.
I don't know.
Round 4 somewhere in Europe, probably. No, Baku, isn't it? Sorry.
Baku
round 4. So, it's you sort of think, if you have a nasty crash at Saudi as well, if you're holding on to that steering wheel still, that's going to be really damaging. So it's whether we could see Drugovitch in the car for the first 2 races, or maybe even does the first 3, and then Lance gets back in for Baku.
Yeah, potentially. And the Aston Martin seems like a pretty good car this year, so I'm sure Lance will be desperate to come back as quickly as possible. But of course, that team is used to this kind of thing. Last year, we had Hulk in the car for the first 2 when Vettel was positive for COVID. So it's kind of par the course. They'll cope, and Drugovitch is a solid pair of hands, I think. So they'll be all right.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly going to be interesting to see, isn't it, how Drugovitch gets on in that car, of course, if he does compete in Bahrain. But Jamie, the biggest news of 2023, finally, Barcelona have got rid of the final chicane. I never thought we'd see this day when it was still a Formula 1 circuit, but this is the best news of the week.
Well, I think you're hyping it a little bit, to be honest.
No, I firmly believe this just because I have so much PTSD of playing F1 2010 through that final chicane at Barcelona and those horrendous curbs. I'm so happy it's gone. I don't think it's going to make Barcelona, the next Spa or something like that.
Definitely not.
But I certainly think it's going to make it a lot better.
I seem to remember you absolutely obliterating that chicane in co-op back on 2020 as well.
Probably.
In qualifying. So it's about time that it went.
It's a very obscure thing to remember, but probably.
I'm still salty. That was my pole position.
Okay. How do you remember that?
I might make it right up. You probably did.
But I mean, it's a good change, so isn't it?
It won't make it a well-beating track or anything. So
no, but I certainly do have hope that it'll make it a lot better.
I have less hope than you.
Okay, that's fair enough. That is fair enough.
We'll see.
Of course, we did discuss this earlier on, actually, before the show, and it did make me chuckle, of course, that we had quite a few people complaining that, Sector 3 at Barcelona was always like this great comparison for who's going to be quick at Monaco next week. But of course, it was never really the case anyway, and this year Monaco's before Spain anyway, so it wouldn't make any difference. So now Monaco can't be used to work out who's going to be quick
in Spain
Sector 3.
That's that crucial bit of information that we all need.
Exactly, what we've all been wondering. Jamie, I think it's time now.
It is.
Are we ready? 2023 predictions. Now, of course, doing this by yourself is probably quite easy. Doing this as a podcast is quite difficult because if we come up with different answers to things. So if you're watching this on Spotify or iTunes, bear with us. We will run through the entire order at the very end. But of course, if you're on YouTube, I'm going to have a fun evening applying graphics absolutely everywhere, all over your screens. But what we're going to do is we're going to run through in order of last year's Constructors' Championship. We're going to place the team, and then we're going to rank the drivers as well. So, Jamie, kick us off. Where are Red Bull finishing and Verstappen and Perez this year? We can do reverse if you'd rather.
Yeah. Keep doing reverse.
Let's change it up.
Traditional. So
Start me off then.
Williams. I have Williams in 9th place in the Constructors. I have Albon 17th and who's the other one? Sargent 20th.
Sargent, that's reassuring. Okay. Well, we agree with on one thing there then.
Okay, that's good. Probably
that's Sargent in 20th.
Yeah. I think Williams' pre-season was okay. Certainly their car seemed reasonable. A bit of a step forward from last year. They're still going to be lower, obviously near the bottom end, but hopefully they can compete for points on more than just massive drag strips, which was kind of the case last year. So yeah, I think Albon would be kind of like a random one-off result where he just gets points enough to take him above the other team that I've put down there. So I think it'll be tight between the bottom two. But yeah, Albon 17th and Sargent I think will struggle. I think it's probably a year too soon. It was what they wanted for him to be a F1. Obviously they were kind of screwed by the whole Piastri situation because they were meant to be having him. So I think Sargent will be okay, but won't put up any trees.
No, and I think that's fair enough, of course. I have placed Williams in 10th, sadly. And I've gone Sargent, like I mentioned, in 20th, Albon in 19th. I think, you mentioned obviously winter testing. It was quite clear from last season that the Williams wasn't actually that much worse than a lot of the other cars, the likes of AlphaTauri or Haas or even Alfa Romeo on quite a few occasions. The big problem for them was just how sensitive the car was in comparison to a lot of other cars. It wasn't anywhere near as raceable as a lot of the teams they were trying to compete with, which in many ways sounds like a really easy fix. In many ways sounds like a really difficult fix. But it wasn't like previous years where the car's just been way slower than everyone else. It was just more sensitive than a lot of other cars around them. I'm hoping they've got that fixed this year, but I just don't see them shifting themselves off the bottom of the roster still, sadly.
Fair enough. We've both got Albon to beat Sargent, which I think we said in the preview shows is probably fairly obvious.
I'm intrigued to see how he gets on this year, though.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to set the world alight, but I think he'll give Albon... Well, I think the thing as well, of course, is what is important in Williams, and of course, we can only read so much into this, but I feel like Albon is probably quite a good teammate to have as a rookie. Whether he's got some of that experience, of course, going up against Max just way out of his depth, he doesn't come across as, and again, obviously, this is just what we sort of see from the media and all this, that, and the other, but he doesn't come across as a driver that will deliberately make Sargent's life difficult.
Yeah.
He seems like the kind of driver that will help him.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he'll be he's someone certainly decent for comparison, but isn't completely unbeatable from Sargent's point of view either.
No, exactly. Moving on, though, Jamie, up to, last year, 9th place, AlphaTauri.
Yes. This year, 10th place, AlphaTauri. I think they're going to really struggle, to be honest. I've got De Vries actually P18 and Tsunoda P19. So I think they're going to... Yeah, their car was... didn't seem to have taken a step forward in pre-season testing. I've seen the super times and the race pace and quali pace. They're definitely down there with Williams. And I'm just not blown away by their drivers at all, to be honest. I think losing Gasly as a team leader will hurt them a lot. I'm not massively impressed with either of their drivers. I think De Vries is solid, which is why I put him ahead of Tsunoda. Tsunoda never really seems to have kicked on as much as he could. And I kind of think this will probably be his last year in the Red Bull family. So yeah, I mean, AlphaTauri, obviously they want to do better than last, but we have said before they're the only team on the grid who aren't aiming to win. So I think that will kind of scupper them a little bit this season. And I've had them in last. And I think I'll pick up a few points, but not many.
Okay, interesting. I've placed them 9th then, so same as last year. I've put De Vries 17th, Tsunoda 18th, though. So interesting that we both think De Vries is actually going to beat out Tsunoda. Like you, though, I feel like Tsunoda pushed on okay last year. He was definitely better than he was in 2021, ironed out a lot of the errors, things like that. But I just wonder whether the clock is ticking at AlphaTauri. And the other thing I really am intrigued by as well in 2023, of course, we had this big talk, didn't we, from Red Bull last week going, unless they move AlphaTauri to the UK or they do something mega with the branding, it's not profitable enough for them as an organisation.
No.
Which is kind of mad to think about when Formula One throughout pretty much this entire history has not been profitable for pretty much any team. It has only been literally the last 5 years or so, less than that Formula One has become profitable for a lot of the teams. But do we see Red Bull try and pump a bit more money into it to try and prove they're a team that other companies are going to be wanting to buy? Or do they just kind of kick it to the curb a little bit and just try and sack it off to anyone they can?
I think the second option is more likely, just because I think demand for F1 teams is quite high at the minute. We've seen a lot of people buzzing around with interest, and there's a ready-made team kind of there for the taking. And I don't think they're legally allowed to move away from Faenza because of all the Minardi stuff back in the day.
I can't see that contract lasting for almost 20 years, Jamie.
Paul Stoddart would kick off.
Paul Stoddart was a baller, but I can't see him caring 20 years down the line.
It wouldn't surprise me if it's something, just Paul Stoddart with Mark Webber. Just come and, refuse to move out of Faenza. So, I don't know.
Just start camping outside. What's Mark Webber got to do with it? Why would he care?
He's Australian and was raced for Minardi once.
Yeah, but that doesn't... What? I mean, Mark Webber was known for loving Red Bull by the end of his F1 career, wasn't he? No, I mean,
this has gone off the rails. Let's move on.
Right. 8th place last year, though, was, of course, Haas. Where have you placed them for 2023?
I have been very boring and kept them where they were, in 8th place.
So have I.
I have... this is where we differ, I'm almost certain. I have Nico Hülkenberg 15th, Kevin Magnussen 16th.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think in my head when I was making this, I kind of have a bit of a midfield 4 and a bottom 2. And I think Haas will kind of fill the gap between, to be honest, which is why...
Is that a bit of hopium because
no,
Hülkenberg's back?
I think Haas have had a reasonable pre-season. They've got a solid pair of drivers. And their car pace, certainly, I mean, Bahrain just flatters them because they're always randomly good at Bahrain. So their car pace for the first race certainly looks like it could be edging on for points. But over the course of the season, I think they'll be solid. I think they'll be comfortably ahead of the bottom 2, but struggle to compete with the next lot on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of both seeing Haas in a pretty similar light, aren't we? I think I've put K-Mag 14th, Hülkenberg 16th. Not that I think Hülkenberg's necessarily a worse driver, but I feel like we're almost potentially going to see a similar thing to last year, of course, where Kevin Magnussen used to the Haas team, everything like that. Whether it's going to be he can score a few big points early on in the campaign. Not that Hülkenberg's going to struggle, but I don't think he'll be as good as K-Mag early on. And then, of course, if we're seeing Hülkenberg, beating K-Mag later on down the year, it'll be like he's finishing 12th, K-Mag's finishing 14th.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. That's kind of the idea I've got in my head.
Fair enough. We'll see. I'm back in Hülkenberg, of course. I couldn't not, and there's no real logic. I just want to. So.
Fair enough. Well, you've predicted him to get a podium this year.
I have, and finished 15th in the championship. So
that is quite impressive.
About that.
He's going past Maldonado vibes, is he? Scores one win and does basically nothing for the rest of the year.
I'll take it.
Alfa Romeo, Jamie.
Finished P7
No,
last year.
Sorry, Aston Martin.
Oh, Aston Martin.
Because they finished P7 last year.
Oh, this is where I feel we may come to a fork in the road. Because
this is the really big one,
Aston Martin have had so much hype around them through pre-season. I have slightly bought into it, and I've put them in P4, which I feel like is unreasonable, but we move. And I have Fernando Alonso in 7th and Lance Stroll in 11th place. And I think it'll be very, very tight between those midfield, like all the next 4 teams we're going to discuss. I think it'll be super tight between at least 3 of them. And I do think Alonso will be best of the rest. I'm fairly happy to say that on record. Come back to this at the end of the season. I think for Aston, it just depends how much Stroll kind of drags them down. I think we saw in 2020 that Perez was comfortably 4th in the championship, having missed a few races. Was he, or was Ricciardo 4th? I actually can't remember.
I think Perez was 4th coming into the year. I'm pretty certain.
He won a race. So, yeah, we saw Perez was right up there, and I think Stroll was like 10th or 11th, which ultimately led McLaren to finish above them.
But this was the mad thing, wasn't it, in 2020 as well, that a lot of people forget. Stroll, those first 3 or 4 Grand Prix...
He was 3rd in the championship after Hungary.
Albeit a bit lucky, but he was 3rd, like you said, in the championship after Hungary. And then basically didn't score again pretty much like the entire rest of the year.
Yeah,
a lot of people go, oh, he was unlucky and all this. But a lot of the time he was just a bit dog-do.
From race 4 until the race before Sakir, Hülkenberg got more points to Racing Point than Stroll did. Doing 3 races, which is mad. Or 2 races, because he didn't even start one of them. So, yeah, I think it's... Yeah, it will be kind of how much Stroll kind of drags them down in terms of overall finishing position, but I think Alonso will smash it this season, to be honest. So,
I mean, there is so much hopium, isn't there, around Alonso at the moment? And I want to give you so much stick about you putting Aston Martin in 4th, but I've done the same.
Oh no.
I've put Alonso in 7th. I've put Stroll though down in 12th.
Ooh.
So I put Stroll one place lower than you have. But I cannot believe we're both getting along on this train. I mean, as you all know, I've always been an Alonso fan. In my eyes, one of the best drivers on the grid.
Definitely. That's definitely true.
I've never given him any stick at all. For those new viewers around here, you'll know I've always backed him up. He's my driver, everything like that. There just seems... I mean, this is the thing, though, isn't it, Jamie? We can say this now, and it could happen. Or, we say this now, Aston Martin finished P8 over on the championship, and Alonso's gone come Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
It's just going to be one extreme or the other.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. And I do think the other two teams, that we're probably going to have in the similar positions, will be right there with Aston, but we will wait and see.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, it's just going to be... there's, like we said, there's so much hopium around Aston Martin this year. There's a lot of people saying they could beat Mercedes. Not convinced,
they could
to
beat
be
Ferrari.
honest. Over strategy, maybe. But I think there's every possibility that Aston Martin could challenge Merc early on in the year.
I genuinely think that's the case. Yeah.
Or it could be that they've really come out of the park swinging, and they're just going to be still battling Alpine and McLaren, and all this hopium is going to dissolve quite quickly. But we'll wait and see. But both of us pinning Alonso as best of the rest is quite a big claim in 2023. Has he finally made a decent move in his F1
we will
career?
See.
6th place last year, though, Jamie. Alfa Romeo. I don't think there's quite as much hype behind them, is there?
No, but people are claiming them to be the dark horses, so I see. So, yeah, I think certainly Bahrain should be a good opportunity for points, because we know... how much some of the other teams seem to be struggling, but I have put Alfa Romeo overall in 7th, so one lower than last year, and I have Bottas in 12th and Joe in 13th. So I've gone head over heart for this one and not put Joe ahead of Bottas, but I think they'll be very close together. And Alfa, I think their car will be solid, and certainly this time last year, everyone in the world was predicting them 10th and 9th, so... I was there predicting them 6th, and I was right. So hopefully we're right again this year.
It's a very, very good point. I've also gone 7th. I, however, have put Bottas 13th and Zhou Guanyu 15th between the Haas drivers.
Fair enough. Not believing Joe. Which
it's a bit weird, isn't it, when it comes to Alfa Romeo? Because it's not that we expect them to fall off drastically.
No.
But it kind of feels like now that they've just got to tread water till 2026... Unless we kind of see Audi getting itchy feet and want to jump the gun a bit, but it just doesn't make sense for them still.
And the size of team that Alpha are, finishing 7th is very creditable, because they've beaten the rest of the independents, and they're behind 6 factory teams, really. So, it's a very good season for them if they finish 7th, even though on paper it looks like they've taken a step back.
Yeah, I think the big question for them, isn't it, was how close they'll still be to those 3 teams.
And I certainly think they'll be ahead of McLaren come Bahrain, but I think over the course of the season they'll end up finishing this position.
Okay, that's fair enough. So P5 last year then, Jamie, was the aforementioned McLaren. Mm-hmm. Where have you placed them for 2023?
I have put them P6 overall, which... Yeah, I feel their pre-season has been shocking. The drivers, I have put Norris in 8th and Piastri down in 14th, which seems a bit harsh, but that's just kind of how it ended up.
Okay.
I think Norris is top 5 on the grid, and I think... I don't think there'll be that many points between, the whole of the midfield, kind of 8th down to 14th. I don't think there'll be loads of points separating Norris and Piastri, but just because of how tight it's going to be, I think that'll be... that will make Piastri look like he's had a really bad season, when actually it won't be for him particularly. But down in 6th, I think race pace for Bahrain, they look like they're going to be 9th, genuinely. It wouldn't surprise me. So I think they'll really have a slow start, but we saw that last year. I think they've got a fundamental issue with brakes again, which seems like something they could have fixed. Well, they did fix last year.
Which was the problem last year, if I remember correctly.
It was.
And power.
Yeah, so I think they will not do well in Bahrain. I'll go nail my colours to the mast and say they will not score points in Bahrain. But over the course of the season, Norris will be able to recover things and we saw, I don't know, 4 or 5 races in, he'd already had the podium and was back up to like 7th in the championship last year. So it won't be a long failure for McLaren. Basically, as soon as they can get out of Bahrain, the better, and get these brakes fixed. So yeah, I've put Norris to come to EV out Piastri, but I don't think the points will be horrendous.
No, I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, we're so boring with these predictions, Jamie.
Have you done
because
the same?
I've also put McLaren 6th. I've put Lando in 8th, just behind Alonso. I put Piastri in 11th, though, ahead of Lance Stroll in 2023. I think in my eyes, I've kind of got this idea that we're going to obviously see the big 6, as we would expect. But I think Alonso and Lando are going to be battling out for that best of the rest crown. You know, we've got Alonso, sort of the old guard, who, you know, wants to try and prove that he's still got it against, you know, some of these young drivers. And I think, obviously, Lando Norris, you know, he's kind of cemented himself as sort of like that king of the midfield over the last couple of years. Once we've sort of, you know, if we're going to see this kind of top 3 big teams breaking away again, you know, Lando Norris is probably the best, in my personal opinion, he's the best driver outside of those big 3 teams, and certainly better than a couple of people inside those 3 teams as well. But I think, you know, Aston Martin are going to just have that bit more pace, and I think Alonso is just about going to get the better of him come the end of the year. But I do think Piastri is going to be better than Stroll still.
Interesting. Fair. So, yeah, you think Alonso will basically carry Aston up to P4, and
I think Alonso is going to carry Aston Martin up to P4, but I think it's going to be very, very tight between all of those teams.
Yeah.
And I do genuinely see a scenario as well where maybe after Melbourne, where obviously Oscar's got that 3-week break, whether obviously, even if he doesn't kick on particularly strong at the start of the year, whether they're then going to be able to really work a few things out. Because I think McLaren are also very conscious of ending up with another Ricciardo situation. So I don't think he's going to match Lando early on in the year, but I think they're going to be looking at that 3-week break a bit like the summer break and going, what have we learnt? What do we need to do? Let's really now smash this thing out the park.
Yeah, and I really hope I want to see Piastri do well, so I hope for his sake that it's a bit closer than I've predicted. But the predictions come first, I'm afraid.
Exactly. Alpine, though, they were P4 last year, Jamie. Where have you placed? Well,
biologically, we're going to both put them 5th, aren't we?
We have both 5th, yeah.
So I have Gasly just ahead of Ocon between 9th and 10th. So,
okay.
Yeah, I think, is that not the same for you, or have you got
I've put them the other way around. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, I remember.
Yeah.
I think Ocon just being settled in that team is just not necessarily going to be better than Gasly, but is just going to have, you know, those better races and just pick up a few more points.
Fair. I think Gasly's got a massive point to prove in his first time out of the Red Bull family. So, yeah, Ocon was very lucky to be ahead of Alonso last year overall. I think he's a solid driver, but I would rate Gasly higher in my personal opinion. But anything could happen. Obviously, Alpine have been famed for shocking reliability in the last few years, so we could see that basically decide the order between these two. But yeah, it's a bit of a toss-up, and this is the way we landed.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, isn't it? I mean, like you said, you seem to be still, you know, a little bit more going with your heart over your head. And I've sort of, you know, in my eyes, placing drivers more that have been with a team already for a year, placing them above their new teammate, unless, of course, you know, it's an Alonso at Aston Martin, is, I think, the only one where... Oh, sorry, and De Vries as well.
Yeah.
Where I've gone the other way around. I just think, you know, Ocon is very well embedded in that French system. And it's going to be the most Frenchy French thing in the world. I mean, really, all we're kind of hoping for, isn't it, this year, is that we see some fireworks like back when they were kids. You know, whether there's going to be some playground pushing and shoving between those two. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if we end up getting a couple of crashes between them, to be honest.
Well, we saw Ocon and Alonso came to blows a few times.
Ocon's got a tendency to crash with his teammate.
He does. He's just not a very nice guy to work with, I can kind of tell. So, we will see. Though hopefully for their sakes it doesn't happen, but we never know. For our sakes, it would be entertaining. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've gone through sort of the bottom 14 then, haven't we, Jamie? I mean, no, neither of us were ever going to be brave enough to predict, you know, an upset to the big 6 at the front.
No.
But Mercedes P3 last year, Jamie. Where are you placing them in 2023?
I really hope we differ, but I'm not sure we will.
I don't think we will.
Because I've put Mercedes in P2, actually.
Oh, okay, we have.
Oh, interesting. And
I was not expecting that.
I have George Russell P4, Lewis Hamilton P5.
You monster.
I said that in our preview, in our Mercedes preview, that Russell would again beat out Lewis Hamilton and kind of establish this as his team.
His era.
His era is starting. This is kind of like Rosberg beating out Schumacher back in the day.
Oh, behave.
That was a bit of slapping up from Rosberg, to be fair, but Russell was quite lucky to beat. I think Hamilton over the course of the season probably performed better, but was unfortunate, and the start really screwed him over when he did have a couple of bad races. But I think Russell will kick on again. He's going to be more settled in that team, and I genuinely do think Hamilton's racecraft has taken a step back, or at least he's too respectful to race as you need to in 2023. So I think that will come to cost him, as they're going to be very tight with at least Ferrari, I think. So he'll be doing a lot of battling, which might end up kind of favouring Russell.
Okay, interesting. Very, very interesting. I kind of get some of the points you've come with there. I'm going against what I said last week, Jamie. I've placed Mercedes P3.
You put Hamilton champion, didn't you, last week?
I did put Hamilton champion.
Nah, you got to stick with that.
But winter testing was not good. I think we're going to see a similar start to the year for Mercedes as last year. They're going to be a little way off the pace from Ferrari and Red Bull. But I mean, this is the weird thing, isn't it? When we're placing these big three teams, is of course we're trying to work out where they're going to take stuff away from each other rather than sort of what they're doing themselves. I think Fred Vasseur is really going to try and steer the troops in Ferrari, of course. Inaki as well has been not replaced technically, but it sounds like he's been replaced over at Maranello as well. So I think Ferrari are going to be really trying to make sure they're on the ball when it comes to strategy this year as well. And, you know, do I think they're going to get it perfect? Absolutely not. Do I think they're going to muck up less than last year? Absolutely so. I've placed Hamilton, though, P3 overall, Russell in 5th. I completely get what you're saying about the racecraft, and there's just a part of me that Lewis Brazil last year was the one where it just kind of, it felt like, for me, that was the moment where he realised the clean, respectful, good old boys club of, you know, that really did come to an end when Max Verstappen came in. You can't argue against it, I don't think,
Verstappen
sensibly.
was that good that he's changed the way people drive.
No, Verstappen was that dangerous. He changed the way people drive in the early days.
And the FIA let him get away with it for way too long.
Yeah, exactly. It's set a precedence now for Formula One that I don't think personally is a very good idea.
Not really, no. And there's kind of no gentleman's agreement, like you saw the likes of Raikkonen, Schumacher, all of those.
But this is the thing that I don't get as well, of course. You know, people bang on about how good that battle was between Alonso and Hamilton at Hungary 2021, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Of course it was a good battle, because those two are the only two drivers still that had that kind of gentleman's agreement in place. If I was the head of the FIA right now, at the end of last year, I would have put a new rule in for 2023 that says if you're battling with another car, you have to give them a car's width on the circuit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be... I would completely be outlawing this whole barging people out.
Yeah.
If their front tyre is alongside your rear tyre, you can't barge them out,
yeah, definitely.
in my eyes.
Because in a minute, it's like, if you're a millimetre ahead, you apparently have the right to shove someone off. Yeah. Which just doesn't really seem like that logical. But you put Hamilton in 3rd, which I think is definitely heart over head, in my opinion. But yeah, we shall see come the end of the season.
So my logic for that is Perez is going to get absolutely binned off. I mean, this is kind of revealing where I'm placing other drivers as well. Perez, I think, is going to get absolutely binned off by Red Bull this year. I think there's going to be a catastrophic fallout between Red Bull and Perez in 2023. I think it's not going to make much difference in the grand scheme of things, but Perez is not going to play ball with Verstappen this year in the way the team want him to. Whether that means that we get a similar year to last year where the car does suit Perez a bit more early on, and then, of course, you know, come Barcelona, they completely gear it back towards Max how they want it. But I think he's going to be really left out to dry this year, and I think Sainz as well is going to struggle.
Okay, we'll see. That's very different to the narrative in my head, but there we go.
Exactly. I mean, we have got very different narratives. But that, I think, is all part of the fun.
Yeah, exactly.
As well. Last year's runners-up then, Jamie? Ferrari. Where have you placed them? Is it Ferrari's year?
No, I don't think it is. I've put Ferrari P3 behind Mercedes, and I have Leclerc P3 with Sainz P6.
Oh no, you put George P4, didn't you?
Yeah. So Mercedes, like Leclerc, will beat out both Mercedes in the championship, but I think Sainz,
they're going to be closer to him.
Sainz will drag him down enough to put Mercedes back ahead. I think Ferrari would have wanted a better pre-season. I think this time last year they were more confident going into the first race of the season. They've certainly had an okay pre-season test, but I think their tyre deg is higher than they wanted, which obviously will have a knock-on effect on strategy, which is a bit of a buzzword for them, really.
I can't wait for them to start throwing out classy 2 stops every week.
Yeah, exactly.
It spicy.
We're going to undercut nobody back in the day. But yeah, I think they will get wins. I would at least... I think I said in their preview that only one of them would actually get a win. So I guess I'm committing that it will be Charles Leclerc. Yeah, I think they will be close. I think they'll be ahead of Mercedes at the start, but I think over the course of the season, Mercedes will usurp them as the second fastest team, and Leclerc will kind of hang on, but Sainz will not. So overall, they'll end up finishing P3.
It does seem very weird that you're backing my team down at Mercedes and I'm not in this narrative. But yeah, I've placed Ferrari P2. I think Charles Leclerc is going to come runner-up again. But I've placed Sainz all the way down in 6th in 2023. We're just kind of both in that mindset of, I think, that Mercedes is going to be a lot closer. I think all 3 teams are going to be a lot closer in 2023. And I feel like that's where, you sort of look at them. Red Bull, I think, will still have an advantage, but Max, Charles, Lewis, Russell are all truly world-class drivers. Perez has proved often that he can hang with a lot of world-class drivers. You just don't quite get that sense still from Sainz, do we?
No, I think he's a very credible number 2. But that's...
Not quite there.
Not quite up with the main 4 guys, or Alonso or Norris, I think we can safely add to that mix.
Yeah. Norris, definitely.
What was it you were saying earlier?
Big Alonso fan, me, mate.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, I think Mercedes are going to struggle early on. I think Ferrari are going to be close to Red Bull still, but I don't think they're going to fall off the way we saw them fall off last year. I think that's the big thing for me. I think Mercedes are going to get to Ferrari. It's not going to be Mercedes getting closer and Ferrari falling back to them at the same time.
Okay. We shall see. That
leaves us then.
Yeah,
okay,
I have a poor feeling for the competitiveness of this season, which is why I've put Red Bull P1 with Max Verstappen P1 and Sergio Perez in P2.
Okay, first time that's ever happened at Red Bull then.
Indeed. I am really concerned for the well-being of Formula 1 because Red Bull are going to batter absolutely everybody this year. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy because it'll be an easy championship, in my opinion, for Max. But if they don't have reliability problems at the start, like they did last year, I think they will, comfortably have the fastest car for the majority of the season. And Verstappen will get another 15, 20 wins, which is not going to be fun for everyone. But it will be fun for the Max fans among us. Yeah,
I mean, perhaps there's a bit of hopium from me against that, but I've put Red Bull first. I put Checo first overall. No, I haven't. I've put Max to win the championship. I put Perez P4. Like I said, I think there's going to be some fireworks within that organisation this year. I think Perez is going to get a bit fed up with the Red Bull regime, and I think there's going to be pressure inside that team to get Ricciardo back in the car as well. So I think Perez is maybe not necessarily going to give up by the end of the year, but maybe his heart won't be in it anymore. But I just think, Red Bull still are probably going to have the quickest car, but I feel like Mercedes and Ferrari are going to keep pushing each other to stay close to them. And there's also just this little part of me, Jamie, that believes that Liberty Media aren't going to allow a team to be completely dominant.
How are they going to do that then?
Mid-season rule changes, little tweaks and changes to the regulations. I feel like we're slipping into this era now where Formula 1 is interested in the money and the numbers, and they're going to try and keep things a bit closer.
I would be extremely surprised because Liberty Media have no say over the rules. That is in fact the FIA who do that.
Very, very true. But Liberty Media.
They do have influence, definitely. Yeah.
They certainly have influence, and they're the ones paying the big bucks at the end of the day.
Yeah, I just think you've got a tinfoil hat on with that, to be honest. But
no,
we shall see.
Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's going to be. It's not going to be like 2005. They're going to ban tyre changes, ready for the new season or something like that. But I feel like there will be subtle tweaks and changes, like we saw, with the ride heights last year and all that sort of thing, that are just going to try and keep Red Bull close.
They're going to add like a 20 kilo ballast to anyone with ER in their 3-letter initial. I think that sounds like a good rule.
That seems like a very good rule. There's just part of me that I think they're going to be focusing on the show still, and it'll hardly be, like I said, they're not going to nerf Red Bull into the ground. But I think it's whether Ferrari and Mercedes come to the FIA going, this is what they're doing, this is why they're so much quicker than us. Say for example, I know obviously it's a really bad example because obviously I know the ride heights have been changed this year, but say it was again that Red Bull were able to run their car lower than other teams. Whether it's, we get a little thing at, say, it won't be Paul Ricard this year, but Austria, for example, where the ride heights have just got to come up slightly, or something like that. It's not going to be a major tweak. They're not going to try and make it obvious that they're going to nerf
They'll stop them
Red
being
Bull.
a second clear, which they
But
might
I think
be
they'll
not.
just be desperate to try and make sure they're not a mile clear.
Yeah. I've kind of poured water on the hype in my head by saying that Red Bull are going to dominate. But yeah, hopefully, for the entertainment's point of view, it's a very good season.
Your boy needs his views at the end of the day. But I mean, that's. Do you just quickly, want to run us back through your entire order then, Jamie, for our audio listeners?
Absolutely. If you're listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, welcome, and I hope you enjoyed. My top 20 is Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Carlos Sainz running around the top 6. 7th place Alonso, 8th Norris, 9th Gasly, 10th Ocon, 11th Stroll, 12th Bottas, 13th Joe, 14th Piastri, 15th Hülkenberg, 16th Magnussen, 17th Albon, 18th place De Vries, 19th Tsunoda, and rounding out in 20th Logan Sargent.
We've only got 5 drivers in the same places.
I felt like we had more like that.
Roster.
That's good.
We've got a lot that are only 1 out.
Yeah,
but we've only got 5 drivers.
But this is knowing wheel. We both know what we're talking about, so hopefully
we do both kind of. Yeah. I mean, it's going to look horrendous when we get this badly wrong come the end of the year, but still. And your Constructors' Championship, Jamie, just quickly for me.
Yeah, P1 Red Bull, then Mercedes, Ferrari, Aston Martin, Alpine, McLaren, Alfa Romeo, Haas, Williams, and Alfa Tauri.
Yeah, they were pretty much all identical.
There's two different. Oh, yeah, 2 differences.
Well, 4 technically.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot more similar on that front. So quickly then, from my side, we've got Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Hamilton, Perez, Russell, Sainz rounding out our big 6. Alonso, Lando, the same as Jamie. Ocon and Gasly the other way round. Piastri in 11th. Stroll, Bottas, K-Mag, Zhou Guanyu, Nico Hülkenberg, Nick De Vries, Yuki Tsunoda, Albon, and Logan Sargent rounding out our 20 drivers, with our constructors as Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Alpine, McLaren, Alfa Romeo, Haas, Alfa Tauri, and Williams.
And caveat, if Drugovitch does race for Aston Martin, we're discounting him. He would beat, in my opinion, Logan Sargent at minimum, probably one of the Alfa Tauris as well, in my opinion.
I wouldn't say that, but okay. I would genuinely rank, if Drugovitch does get that drive, I would still put him 21st overall.
Nah, he'd beat Sargent.
Fair enough. Is there anything else to go through, Jamie, or are we now basically ready for F1 2023?
Well, Drive to Survive came out, but do we care?
I haven't watched any of it.
I've not watched. I mean, I might do, but I've not yet. So.
I haven't watched any of it yet, so I can't really say much. I probably will watch some of it at some point, but it's not at the top of my to-do list. I'll put it that way.
Fair enough.
Like we mentioned at the start, we will be back then either... Thursday or Friday. I butchered the outro there immediately. We'll be back with a preview show ready for the Bahrain Grand Prix, of course, going through, getting ready for the weekend. We'll also do sort of our big F1 fantasy talk through, but like I mentioned at the start, there will be links down in the description if you want to go and join up the league quite quickly before that all gets underway. But Jamie, as always, it's been a pleasure. And I can't wait to hear your smooth, sultry tones again later on in the week as we count down ready for the Bahrain Grand Prix.